Welcome to Moments with LeAnn. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very informative show coming right up with special guest LeAnn Hull, and she's here today to share with us her new book, How to Live When You Want to Die. So can your heart heal when a child commits suicide? Suicide's a topic that we all hope to never experience, but many do. Following the ultimate death of her son, LeAnn Hull is choosing love, encouragement, and suicide prevention. Through the Andy Hull's Sunshine Foundation, LeAnn is hoping to impact as many children, teens, and adults as possible. LeAnn's looking to spare, even if it's just one person, the pain and anguish that suicide causes. So let's welcome to the show, LeAnn Hull.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, what a joy it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I mean, it's such a heart-wrenching book and at times so difficult to read, but I'm so glad that you wrote it.
Oh, me too. You know, I didn't, I never thought I was going to be an author, didn't know that I was going to write a book. It just seemed to evolve and I seemed to be led to do it.
Well, so for our listeners that are new to your story, why don't you share with us what happened that brought you to the place that you are now, where you have the Andy Hull Sunshine Foundation and you wrote this book? What happened that brought you to this place?
You know, for most of our lives seemed kind of the typical, happy, everything seemed great kind of life. I've been married for 39 years. I have 4 kids, 3 grandkids. We owned a construction company for 28 years. Things just seemed to be running along very smoothly for us. And then all of a sudden, our 16-year-old son, Andy, he died by suicide in 2012. And that, of course, rocked our world and shook us to the very core and sent us on a path of trying to figure out how to survive that.
Well, you hear this.
Go ahead.
You hear this a lot from families who have gone through having a loved one commit suicide, that a lot of times they're just sideswiped. They have no idea where that came from.
Right. That's the biggest question for any of us afterwards, or anybody around that's been supporting us, is how did that happen? And what did we miss? And what could we have done? And how could this amazing kid, what were the signs? What was he feeling? And so, what I've learned, it's been 6.5 years for us. What I've learned is, first of all, there's no answer to that why. Because Andy's not here to tell us. Our loved ones aren't here to tell us after they've transitioned on. And so asking that question and trying to find the answer, I knew early on was just going to be pointless and probably hold me hostage in a place where I didn't want to be held hostage. I wanted to remember Andy for the life that he lived rather than how he died. And so, of course, in retrospect, I can see some of the signs. And as everybody likes to think, hindsight's 20/20. And so those are some of the things that I work on now. And that's what helped me to form the foundation, was just a passion to help illuminate some of those signs for other parents, maybe, that we might be missing so that their child might survive. And then the second portion was really, how can I help other people survive the tragedies that they're experiencing? And it doesn't have to be necessarily suicide or the loss of a child. It could be a divorce or loss of a job or any number of tragedies or traumas that you experienced.
Well, it's just so traumatic to go through that, especially as a mother, and gosh, my heart goes out to you and your family. It must have taken just extreme courage to be able to sit down and write this book.
It was an interesting process. I didn't write it until the 3rd year. And I think for most people that experience a traumatic event, writing, reading, those things are often really, really difficult in the early years. And we experience what I liken it to be like PTSD. And it's hard for us to remember. It's hard for us to think clearly. We're really in a state of shock, which is a blessing because it helps to cover us and protect us and insulate us as we begin the process moving forward. So year 3, I really was, I was experiencing joy and life again. And that's what led me to write. I wanted to write about the things that I did, the foundation that I laid in the first 2 years that allowed me the ability to share that experience with others and give them courage and hope, and especially hope, to move forward with anything that they've experienced.
Was there a time where you came to a place that you understood it's like, gosh, okay, I can choose how I respond to, not just this tragedy, but any tragedy?
And weirdly enough, that moment came just a couple hours, within an hour or two after Andy had passed. It was my first moment of walking into the restroom and looking in the mirror and reconciling that this had actually happened to me and not someone else, that this was now going to be what I had to deal with. And I said 2 things that I'm not sure where, of course I am sure where. I really feel like they were divinely inspired, that paved the way for my movement forward. And I said, I will praise you in the storm. And so that was a decision, not an emotion. That was a choice that I knew that I had to choose and not be led by my emotions. And the second was, I'm not the first mom to lose a kid. And that helped me. I knew that if all these other moms could survive the loss of their children, I certainly could. And it helped me feel connected and not feel isolated in my loss alone.
I know you also talk about how you chose love and encouragement towards others instead of retreating into your pain. And a lot of times, I think with situations like this, or when people have gone through a tremendous loss, it's easy to get into that place of retreat.
Oh, gosh, I see it so often. It is, because the emotions are so, they're so overwhelming. They are so powerful. And it takes all the fight in you to continually make decisions based on your emotional response. And that's a daily thing, and that's exhausting. And that's oftentimes why people give up and quit trying, is because it's so tiring. But when I knew that if I chose to stay in anger or blame or guilt or any of those emotional responses, then I would never be able to remember Andy for who he was and who he is. And I wanted people to never forget my son. And that meant, since he wasn't here any longer, that was up to me. And how I conducted myself on a daily basis would be my best example of who my sunshine Andy was. And that's what I wanted to do. And don't get me wrong, this wasn't something that was easy. This was not something I succeeded at every day. This is something I did fail at and would take 2 steps backwards and have to regroup and make a new decision and move forward again. So it was a grueling process. The first, especially the first year, really the first 2 years were very, very challenging for me.
I couldn't even imagine. And it's part of a club that no one wants to be a part of. It's yeah. All of a sudden you're a member of it going, how did I get here?
Yes. And, while the book it chronicles the first 18 months after Andy moved to heaven, it is not a memoir of Andy or me or our lives. It is really a mixture of that, but with all kinds of ways to cope and maneuver through the things that you may be experiencing. So it is filled, the book has humor in it. It is very uplifting. I tried often throughout the book, whenever I felt like it was too heavy, I would interject it with something that would relieve you from staying in that place of sitting with me in pain. So there's fun, there's laughter, so that so that the reader would get a reprieve and not have to experience my life in the way that I had to experience it.
What were some surprising things that brought you that laughter and was able to move you from that deep pain?
I think the best thing that helped me was to continue to surround myself with Andy's friends and to continue being part of a life that he had begun, and that I could continue participating in for a while. Andy was in his junior year when he transitioned to heaven. And so that meant that all of his friends still had another year and a half left of high school, all the events, prom, homecoming, and in particular for Andy, who was so heavily involved with baseball, the varsity season baseball team, the junior year and senior year. So all of those moments, I made the decision to continue sharing with those kids because they continued wanting to be a part of my life. And I thought, gosh, if they're brave enough to want to continue talking about their friend and honoring him and loving him, then I most certainly can be brave enough to participate and show up in their lives while they're doing that. And that was a unbelievably difficult thing for me to do, to walk back on the school campus, to walk back to the baseball fields, to show up at these events. But I learned so much about myself during that. I learned that the getting there was really, really tough. But while I was there, I could actually get lost in the moment and in the enjoyment of watching the game or a choir concert or whatever the event may be. And that it was almost like I was watching myself enjoy that. And I realized, okay, that is possible then to exist in that place. And it gave me hope and it allowed my brain a reprieve. And then, of course, I had to leave and be prepared for that. And what would that look, and plan for my time alone after those events to make sure that I could stay healthy and continue my forward motion. It was a dance. It was definitely a dance of backward and forward and sideward motion all the time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Are you still in touch with Andy's friends today?
Some of them. And, that's been a process of my letting them go, because I wanted to hold on to, for me, they were the last living connection with my son. And so it was tough for me to let them go as they graduated and went on to college. But that gave me a year and a half to kind of prepare for that. And I knew I had to prepare for that. So I did, and did some things that were ceremonious with their graduation that would allow some closure of that chapter. And then some of them will still message me on Mother's Day, or of course, Andy's angel date, or maybe even his birth date. There's a handful of them that will stay in touch with me from time to time, but not that daily contact that we had for that year and a half. I mean, they still showed up at my house for months afterwards, after Andy passed. So that was a comfort for me. And it also forced me to make sure that my emotional process was intact, that I didn't add to their emotional pain with my emotional pain. So it showed me that I could control some of that. That was really important and healthy for me.
Well, it also probably helped them work through their pain, being able to have that connection with you.
It did. I felt like I was being given a gift to show a whole group of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids how you could survive something so terrible in your life and embrace it, not run from it, not hide from it, but you could look at it straight on and not use unhealthy coping skills like drinking or drugs or unhealthy behaviors. That they were watching me. I knew they were watching me from the day one. So they were watching everything I did. What did I do from day to day? What did I do if they saw me crying, which I wasn't afraid for them to see me crying. I knew, though, that it was important for them to see me recover from those moments. And how did I do that? So it was, those kids went on, some of them, to do some projects in college on suicide awareness and You Matter. And just, it was amazing to watch the things that they did with this traumatic experience in their life because of how we handled it.
During that time, what were some of the things or some of the ways that you pushed through the pain? What helped you get through that and then come out the other side and have that desire to keep living? Because I know so many parents, when they go through that, they really just kind of give up on their life as well.
Yeah, I speak about that oftentimes when I'm presenting to other parents who've experienced loss. It is that the difference between so many people waiting for time to heal or waiting for it to feel better. And if you're sitting around waiting, nothing will ever happen. This is an active journey, not a passive journey. So you have to be an active participant in your movement forward. And that meant that I had to do things that were uncomfortable. I read 80 books my first year after Andy passed. And I've had many people tell me that, and I do understand it, that because of a traumatic experience, it is hard to concentrate, it's hard to focus. And so I'd have to reread paragraphs sometimes 5 times. And then even sometimes I might not remember the content. So I'd have to reread it again. The point was, I didn't stop trying. It's kind of like going to the gym. We don't go to the gym and think we're going to come out looking like this amazing specimen. We have to keep at it until our body begins to change. It's the same with our mind. We have to keep at it until we've created new pathways and new habits that transform those negative and sad ones into something that's a positive one. And so that practice, I didn't see the results that first year. I really had to be patient and believe and trust that the things that I were doing the first year were going to make a difference for me in the second and the third year. I had to set a goal. What did I want to look like? What did I want my life to look like?
Yeah, that's so much to consider and to have, just to sit down and have that. It requires a great deal of patience and persistence. How did you not become discouraged during all this?
First of all, I think to some extent it's my nature. So that helped me to begin with. Everybody has a different process to begin with based upon who they are to start with. So my process is going to be different than my husband's because we're just two very, very different people. I'm a more outgoing type person in that sense, and I'm more of a chatty, talkative. And so my process is going to be like that. So that helped. My nature is naturally to be a fixer, to want to move forward. That's just who I am. So that gave me a leg up to begin with. And then I think that I was always an avid reader before Andy passed. And so I knew how books impacted me before, and that I could choose the books that would have that kind of the desired effect for me moving forward. So I didn't, let's give you an example. I didn't choose books on suicide or depression or grief. And Lord knows, everybody wanted to give me a book on how to grieve. Well, I could have written the book on how to grieve. I didn't need another book. I wanted books of other heroines and heroes who had survived and overcome traumas and tragedies. And how did they do it? Because I knew that I'd never lost a child. And so I needed more tools than I was naturally equipped with. That meant I had to go find them. I had to figure out how to add more tools into my toolbox. And books, reading, music. Music was very impactful for me before Andy moved. So therefore, I knew it could potentially have that same kind of impact afterwards. But I had to choose carefully. I listen to many parents, many people who say, oh, that song just it reminds me of my child or my husband or whatever it is, and it makes me cry. And I just want to, well, and why are you listening to it? I don't listen to things that make me cry. I do that enough naturally. I want to listen to things that make me strong and powerful and change how I'm feeling and make me want to walk out the front door and go figure it out again,
Well,
I
that's
was
so
very,
encouraging,
yes, yeah, very selective.
Mm-hmm.
One tool doesn't work the same every day, just like for a mechanic. So I had to have a variety of tools that I could use. If one didn't work, I had to find another one that day because I wasn't going to be satisfied with being where I was at that particular moment.
Well, it shows a lot of just how resilient a person can be, and also to not give up when you're going through, such a tragic loss and through grief, to really work to get to the other side, because while we walk through it, it's always with us.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, I attended a couple of grief meetings, the first right after Andy had moved, because people really were encouraging me to do that. And when I walked into those grief meetings and I looked around and I was listening to the people's stories, and when I heard people say that it had been 10 years and they sounded just like I sounded at that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, there is no way I want to sound like this or feel like this 10 years from now. That meant I had to figure it out. So that was I didn't go back after that. I knew I had to find different methods rather than sitting around commiserating in my misery, because that doesn't propel you forward. And I have had some people tell me that they feel like I'm judgmental about this. They tell me, you know what, LeAnn, I don't have any choice in how I feel. And I tell them they most certainly do. And they don't like that because that means they have to do something about it. So that's been difficult for me. I've tried to find a balance so that I don't sound so harsh. And yet I want to encourage people that you do absolutely have a choice in how you respond to everything that happens to you in your life. Everything. It's up to you.
How important is that? And it provides a lot, I think, of empowerment when someone realizes that, because then you don't feel like you're stuck in a situation. You can actually have some growth and continue to walk.
Well, and there's that word stuck, because anytime I use that word stuck, I get not a lot, but I do get feedback from people, very negative, telling me they don't like that I'm telling them that they're stuck. So I have to be cautious on all the words that I choose, because there are a whole group of people. And if you think about it, okay, let's say that what is stuck, it's all relative. So somebody's process might take 5 years to get where it only took me 2 to 3. And so I could potentially be using that word stuck for them and hinder them in their movement forward, that eventually they will hear and be able to move forward. So it's been a huge learning experience for me to choose very carefully what I say and how I say it, so that it's encouraging and not stifling for anybody. I can certainly talk about my journey and what I wanted for me, where I wanted my life to be, and try not to compare it to someone else's path or time frame.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because I do want to help everybody, and especially within my group of other parents. When I'm surrounded by other moms and dads who are in such pain, I want to lift them and move them. I want them to be where I'm at, but you can't do that for someone else. You can only be that light and encourage them to follow, and they either will or they won't.
Well, and I'm sure your message will resonate with some people, while others, it's not quite where they're at that moment. And so it's interesting. I always feel like the water evens out. Like, people get what they're supposed to get.
Yeah. Yeah. You get, I don't know if you have done a lot of listening and reading of people like Zig Ziglar and Schuler and people like that. They really were a motivating factor for me 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, really, when my husband and I read a lot of books by Zig Ziglar, and it formed a thought process in our brain that created habits that we could fall back upon at any given time. So you have to feed your mind, just like you do your body, with how you want your life to be. And people just don't understand that, I think. And that's an important passion for me, is to educate people, to at least give them the opportunity to understand that there is a possibility that there could be something better or different for them.
How did you come up with the title of your book?
Well, that's how I felt. I wanted to die every day. I thought about it actively. I'll tell you, probably for the first, almost until year 3, maybe it was a daily thought process. That's how I felt. That didn't mean that's how I acted, but that is how I felt. And so my journey those first 2 years was, how was I going to live when I felt like dying every day? What do I do with that? What do I do with those emotions? And so people see me now, and sometimes they think, she doesn't understand how bad I feel. Well, you can ask some of my close friends who walked that walk with me the first couple years, and I'm sure they thought that at any given moment I wasn't going to be here the next day. So I thought it's just the most realistic. I thought anybody could relate with that who's experienced something traumatic in their life. I think that everybody probably at any given moment has probably felt like, I don't want to be here today. This is not good.
Yeah, especially losing a child. I mean, because it's no parent should have to bury their child.
No, we're not prepared for that, and I think that's, again, a blessing. You can talk to anybody else who hasn't experienced the loss of a child, and they'll say, I can't imagine. They'll say, I don't know how you survived. Sometimes I just want to smack them, because what choice did I have? How did I survive? Or they'll say, I don't think I could survive that. Meaning what? Meaning you love your child more than I love my child, and of course you wouldn't survive, and I did? No. It means that I made choices, and so I wanted people to really understand the depth of how it really was for me. I really wanted to die. That's how real it was. And I chose to live. That was the choice I made, and that everybody can make. And not just live physically, but live spiritually, to thrive, to not just exist on the planet, but to go on then and figure out how to contribute something back after the worst thing ever had been taken from me.
Well, LeAnn, I can't even imagine what that is like. We are going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with LeAnn Hull in regards to her new book, How to Live When You Want to Die. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place, here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
If not me, then who? This ethos is driving the Travis Manion Foundation to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to develop character in future generations. In 2007, Marine First Lieutenant Travis Manion was killed in Iraq while saving his wounded teammates. Travis's legacy lives on in the 5 words he spoke before leaving for his final deployment. If not me, then who? Guided by this mantra, veterans continue their service, developing strong relationships in the community and thrive in their post-military lives. Visit TravisManion.org and ensure the character of our nation's heroes lives on in the next generation. If not me, then who?
Welcome back to Moments with LeAnn. We're here today with special guest LeAnn Hull, who's sharing with us her new book, How to Live When You Want to Die. Now, LeAnn, before we went for break, we were talking in regards to suicide, what people go through, and there's a lot of times people find themselves in this club that they never intended to be a part of. You know, are there resources out there to help them and to help them move through, or not even through, but to help them with this difficult time?
Yeah, fortunately, I was led to a group called Helping Parents Heal. And that group has actually, unfortunately, 12,200 members in it worldwide. And it's just a small organization that began here in Phoenix, Arizona by another mom. And then she had a co-founder, a dad who'd lost his son. So both of them had lost their boys. And they created this group. And it's going on, I want to say 11 years now. And so I found them within the first month after Andy passed. And that was a much better place for me to be than any grief group because it focused on helping parents heal. It didn't focus on the grief journey. It's like survivors of suicide. I didn't want to be a survivor of suicide. I didn't want to be labeled like that. And I didn't want to be in a grief group where that's the whole focus. How do we survive our grief? You know, what you focus on is what you're experiencing every day. And so helping parents heal, while we did talk, you know, the focus was talking about our kids, who they were and who they still are, who they are in the spiritual realm now. And that gave me hope. And I went to those meetings every month after month after month. And I would say, it's funny because I would say after each meeting, I'm not going back, you know, because it was hard. And yet every month I went back, and then I began to form friendships there. And now my husband and I have a core group of other parents that we socialize with. And so we laugh and talk about our kids. And that's just been such a huge gift.
In what ways do you still feel connected to your son?
Well, you know, as controversial as it may be, you know, my background is an evangelical Christian. That's who I was for pretty much all my life, a born again Christian. And so initially my faith carried me. And that was, the statement that I made, I will praise you in the storm, was obviously a faith-based statement that meant I'm going to have faith in the midst of my storm. Our faith is really defined by how we respond in the midst of tragedy and trauma. Everybody can have faith when things are good, but who are you when things are tough? And so I knew that there was a heaven. I knew that we were all, my husband and Andy, we were all going to go to heaven. But after Andy passed, that wasn't enough for me, because I wanted to know more about heaven. What's it like? What's my kid doing? What is he doing? Is he sleeping or is he resting? I hate that term, rest in peace. I don't want to think of my 16-year-old kid as resting in peace. So we initially put on his Facebook page, PIP instead of RIP, play in paradise. I wanted to think of my kid as playing. I want to think he's still playing baseball and wakeboarding and jumping off cliffs. And I wanted to know that he was alive. And so I kept having a few people message me privately that I should go see a medium. And I thought, oh hell no, I'm going to go to hell if I go see a medium. And so, but my pain and my pain really superseded my fear, I would tell you. So I did, the woman that was recommended to me, I didn't even tell my husband, I didn't tell anybody. And I made an appointment to go see her because she's a very well-known medium. And she happened to be here in Phoenix, Arizona. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do this. If I've got a chance of talking to my kid, that's what I'm going to do. And she said that meeting changed my life. I talked to Andy that day, and I knew that he was alive and living, obviously not in the physical sense like I am here with me, but he's alive in spirit, and he said things to me that were really pivotal for my ability to move forward in life. And it was that medium who actually introduced me to helping parents heal.
Well, I'm glad you shared that, because a lot of times people, they kind of get stuck by, whatever society boundaries have, and whatever you need to heal is whatever you need to heal.
Well, and it was tough because I did lose a lot of friends. My Christian friends are gone. They are not part of my life anymore because they do not accept this path. They don't accept the exploration, talking to mediums, none of it. And what I tell them is, hey, when you've lost a kid, come back and talk to me. Because until then, you have no clue what you're talking about. You have no clue the depths the lengths that you would go to be able to talk to your child again. And I felt such peace from that meeting, and I felt hope. And then I gave myself permission to go back and see her every 6 months for the first couple years. I didn't want to become dependent on her because I knew I still had to live here in the physical plane, and that talking to my kid was extra, and that I couldn't live where he's at right now. I could see the signs, and I could begin to recognize his participation in my life here in a spiritual sense. And so I do feel like he visits and that I get to talk to him, and I don't have to go see her anymore in order to do that. She really paved a way for me to communicate with my son myself. Not like we're sitting on the phone chatting, but enough so that it provided enough comfort for me. That was important.
Well, how empowering is that to get to the place where you can have that communication and that connection? I've been to many events. I have friends that are psychic mediums and have been to many of their events that they hold as well. And the healing that you say, kind of see take place at these different events, or I've had friends that have gone to them afterwards, just talking with them, you can tell that something's been lifted, and they actually are in a place where they're able to connect greater with some type of inner peace.
Yes. I would if you'd have told me, I mean, I would have told anybody else that they were definitely going to hell if they, were on the path that I'm on. So, I mean, I understand to a certain extent not why my friends left me. But I think now I see it as a very narrow-minded way of thinking. And I would want, like you said, whatever path helps you heal, that's the path you should be on. So it was life-changing for me. And then so for the rest of my family too, because they were all, born again Christians, just like I am, my husband and my kids. And so this was a huge shift for our family, huge shift. And then finding that balance between our faith-based mentality and our new spiritual journey. We found a balance that's comfortable now for all of us. And it's awesome. But it is, the focus of helping parents heal is about connecting with our kids and whatever means that would be. And sometimes they'll bring in psychic mediums to our meetings. And we have other people that come in and teach us mindfulness and yoga nidra, and all kinds of spiritual energy healing. So trying to find different paths to help ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, did you, come to a point where you're like, gosh, over, just the time, as time has gone on, that this healing journey that you're on has become a little bit easier?
Oh, absolutely. And I would tell you now that while I would go back in a heartbeat and have Andy back, who I am now is so much better and so much different than who I was before. I am a much better person. I have changed and transformed so much. More empathy, less judgment, more compassion. I am more hopeful. I'm calmer. I think when you experience the loss of a child too, I always tell people, when they'll say, well, I'm sorry for that inconvenience, like if someone's late or doesn't show up for an appointment, I'm like, it really doesn't faze me. After what I've been through, you're being late or a meal not coming out right or whatever happens, even the car getting wrecked, none of that is a crisis like it used to be, because it's all perspective now. It's all relative.
Well, I'm sure what's important has really changed for you as well, because you look at these things where people maybe they get stuck in traffic and get irritated, or someone cuts in front of them in the line of the grocery store, or someone's slow, whatever the case is. It sounds like the perspective has completely changed.
Totally changed. My grandson he's not ever been a real zippy kind of driver. And especially when he was a new driver, he actually was very fearful and he didn't like it. And so I think of people on the freeway or the highway these days and they're driving slow or whatever. And I think, that could be my grandson. So I try to personalize everything that I'm experiencing to someone that I know and love. And that gives me a greater empathy towards or patience, whatever that is. It does give me a new perspective. Now, don't think that I'm always like that. Of course, there are times when I fail at that as well. And I'm a jerk like everybody else, but I do recognize it a little bit earlier and then go, oh, okay, let's get back on path here, LeAnn. That didn't look very pretty.
Wow, I really commend you, because while we're each of us are on our spiritual path, coming to those realizations, especially going through such tragedy. I know it has to be like such a difficult and rewarding thing at the same time. I'm not even quite sure how to verbalize that.
I think it is very difficult to verbalize, to identify that, because it's probably a lot of everything. It is horrible and amazing. Do you remember a movie that came out called Collateral Beauty?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it's like. How can you have something so catastrophic that becomes so beautiful? That's how, oh, I just got goosebumps. Wow. Okay, so that's how this is. Something so unbelievably terrible that has opened my eyes. I see things so differently. I never knew it was possible to look at things or to experience things the way that I do now, especially after something so terrible. And that took some time for me to reconcile because for the first couple years, no, not even the first couple, probably the first year, I was hesitant to even tell anybody that I was doing okay, even if there were moments that I was, because in our minds, as a parent who's lost a kid, we don't want anybody to think we're ever going to get over this, or that our loss isn't so unbelievably devastating that we could possibly go on. And so when someone would ask me, how are you? I'd be like, well, you don't want to know. And finally, I reached that place. I remember it about 4 months afterwards. And I remember hearing myself say, I'm fine. And I thought, gosh, I hope they don't think that that means that I'm okay, that my son's not here. But in that moment, I allowed myself to say, I'm fine, and let that be, and not have to worry about what anybody else thought. And then I could validate it, reinforce it, and continue practicing that and changing what I was saying, instead of, oh, you don't want to know how I feel, to, yeah, I'm okay. Because there's no way anybody's going to ever know anyway, unless you've lost a kid. There's no way that I could possibly explain that or help you to understand what that's like. So there's no point in my trying to continue validating my pain to you, because you'll never get it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not stood in the shoes that you're wearing, but being able to be in this place where you're saying, I'm all right, can encourage families who have gone through the same type of tragedy that you've gone through, be able to get to a place where they can say that as well. And maybe it's tiny steps towards a healing process.
Absolutely. And I think that what I knew is that I didn't want to be judgmental of other people. So you haven't lost a child, but you may have experienced something that you felt rocked your world to the core. Well, I would never want to diminish that or belittle it by saying, oh, I've experienced the worst thing ever. Even though I may feel that, there's no point in my saying it. And so by identifying and allowing other people, validating their experiences, like I mentioned earlier, maybe a divorce or an infidelity or anything else, my experience of losing a child, how I survived that, is meant to inspire people of all walks of life going through whatever they may be, not just losing a child, but whatever is significantly traumatic in their lives. How can I encourage you to take hold of your life and get yourself back into the driver's seat?
Yeah, and to kind of move in a direction that at least is feeling like, hey, you know what, today I can live a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. And I just gave a presentation to a group of parents recently, and they did bring that up. They said it again. They said, well, it's hard for me to let go of telling people that I feel bad. I think we as a society get in the habit of doing that because we want people to understand how the difficulties that we're experiencing. So we continue to perpetuate it through the words we're speaking, and we keep ourselves in that place as long as we're talking about it. And I think then some of us get our pats on our back or our sympathy by being in that place. I felt like I got as much when I finally understood, I guess, that I'm going to get as much support and encouragement by telling people I'm okay as I did when I told them I wasn't okay. It allowed me to say, I'm okay. Do I miss my kid? Yes. Do I wish he were back here? Yes. I can't wait for the day that I get to see him. Am I afraid of death? No. Am I encouraging it? No. I am living here. And it's only in the beginning to honor him. There's something that I did and it's one of the things that I teach is when I'm talking to parents, or, hey, if you've lost a spouse, it could be the same thing, or a parent. If you picture the tables were reversed and you're in heaven and your loved one is back here, how would you want them to be living? Would you want them to be as miserable as you are right now? Or would you want them to go on with their life, this gift of life that's a blessing? Would you want them to cherish every moment that they have? And that was a different way for me to flip the scene and go, well, Andy doesn't want me sitting here sucking my thumb, wallowing in my misery. He wants me out there living. And I wanted that.
That's so beautiful. And, and I love what you've done as well. You've created a foundation in memory of Andy, and I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
It was interesting how it evolved, because it started out just as a birthday celebration. So his birthday was 4 months after he moved to heaven, and trying to figure out what to do for that birthday. So we planned an event at an amusement park, and we wanted it to be a fun event for all of Andy's friends, because I knew they'd come. They were looking what to do. And I also wanted to be educational. How could we bring about resources for suicide awareness or any kind of harmful behavior, cutting, eating disorders, whatever it may be? And so we did an event where we charged a certain price, and we brought in professionals, because I wasn't that professional, to help with pamphlets and answer questions while the kids were at the amusement park. And they could stop by and get literature and talk to anybody. And it turned out to be so successful that we ended up with a surplus of $10,000. And so it was kind of like, what do we do with that now? And I thought, why not do scholarships for the graduating seniors at Andy's school and have them write essays on why they matter, on who do you matter to and why, whether it's your parents, your friends, your family. And I didn't want those scholarships to be attached to a specific grade point average. I really wanted it to be attached to a thought process and a cognitive, what they were adept, and help them to take that forward with them. How could they use that then as they moved forward with that You Matter message and impact others with it? And so we did those scholarships, and through that process, we realized we needed a 501c3, and we had an attorney that we were working with who volunteered pro bono to set that all up for us. And there just didn't seem to be any better name than Andy Hull's Sunshine Foundation, because Sunshine was his nickname. He was the sunshine for all of us. And people called him that. That's who our kid Andy was. That's who he still is.
What is the mission of Andy Hull's Sunshine Foundation? Because I know there's a lot that goes to it. You talked initially about birthdays, and then you've got it set up as a 501c3 where it's really helping with community outreach. When people hear about your foundation, what do you want them to know?
There's really 3 entities to our foundation. Number one, I give presentations. So they can request a speaker. I don't charge for it. I never have. This is a labor of love. We do fundraising to support our yellow wristbands, which have a You Matter message on it. And so at every presentation that I do, we hand out as many wristbands as anybody wants. So we don't limit it to one per person. We tell them, we want you to take one for yourself, but then we want you to take as many as you want to give to as many people as you can think of that need to hear that You Matter message. And it started out, the presentations began actually at Andy's school. I presented my first time to 3,000 kids, his student body. And then other schools heard about it and asked if I would come to their school. And so there would be kids that would be waiting after my presentation, and they would have their whole forearms lined with wristbands, telling me who all they wanted to give these wristbands to and how important that message was. I heard people telling me that that they had actually thought about suicide the night before, and that my message now had given them hope. So it was really impactful from the very start. And so I present, it expanded from schools to I present at businesses, construction sites, churches, Rotary clubs, you name it, wherever anybody wants me to share my message of teaching. You know, I talk about who Andy was, the triggers that led to his suicide, potential triggers, and then the healthy coping skills that I've used that may help you in whatever journey you're facing. That's the focus of my presentation. And then our other two entities, we have a curriculum now, which is our Camp You Matter. It's an indoor wilderness experience. It's a 10-week curriculum designed for elementary school age kids, potential building to help them to discover their worth and their value and who they are and who they're created to be. And then we have a volunteer reading program called Sunshine Readers, and we have adults of every age. So we have some of Andy's friends, so they're young adults, as well as retired teachers, anybody that wants to contribute back to their local schools and go in, and we train you to read. We supply you with books and a reading list of awesome books that are uplifting for the kids. And it's just, the foundation has just grown and grown. Our wristbands have now gone all over the world. So because of the presentations I do, I YouTube them and all kinds of things. Our wristbands have gone to Australia, Scotland, New Zealand, Kuwait, Nigeria, Canada, you name it, all over the U.S. People will request wristbands and we ship them for free. You tell us why and who you want them for, and we send them to you.
What a beautiful service that you offer, and just how empowering that is. Especially, this is September, Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and I think this is a good time to be having this conversation for people who maybe think that this is kind of still a taboo topic to discuss.
Yes, it's definitely a taboo topic. And that's the only way. We're just like anything, whether it's AIDS or anything that is threatening our society, we have to talk about it in order to change the statistics. I think it's so taboo because it's so shameful and there's so much guilt, potential guilt associated with it. How could this happen? Or even people will say, that was so selfish. How could they do that to their loved ones? You know what? There wasn't a selfish bone in Andy. He would never have wanted to hurt us. It was a painful, impulsive moment that led him to end his life like that. And I really am very passionate about helping people understand how impulsive it is. And it's because of my understanding it, my feeling it, that has helped me to understand how close you can come and how easily you can be pushed over the edge.
Yeah, I think most people don't really realize how much stress our young people are going through. And I understand that you're actually in the process of helping to pass legislation. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
There are two bills that we passed. One was in 2014. It was just a year and a half after Andy moved to heaven. And it was a bill that allowed for suicide education and training to be counted as continuous education credits for educators. It didn't make it mandatory. We wanted it to be mandatory, but at that point in time, we couldn't make that happen. So at least it laid a foundation for that. And then just this year, 2019, a bill was passed in the state of Arizona that made it mandatory now for all educators to get training on suicide awareness and prevention. And unfortunately, that came about that was spearheaded because there were 33 kids that died within just a few months of each other, all within just a couple of the same schools in a same geographical area. And that made a lot of media noise. Thankfully, the media did talk about it, and that brought about a focus on it, and that allowed us then to lobby and get this bill passed. and make it a law here just this last May. So,
well, congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, anyone that's involved in any kind of legislation knows it's a long and tedious process to get things moving. So I really want to congratulate you on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I did write about it, that it made me realize that almost anybody that lobbies or testifies for a bill, we're usually not testifying for our loved ones anymore because they're not here or they've already experienced this. We're testifying to help save lives and prevent things from happening to others. So all of the moms and dads that were down there with us, there wasn't a single mom and dad that was down there with us to testify who hadn't already lost a child.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. Very heartbreaking. Well, and so we were talking about this month being Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Do you have any upcoming events that people can either attend, or is there a way that they can participate with Andy Hall Sunshine Foundation?
Yes. I mean, first of all, they can go to our website, which is andyssunshine.com. And it's got the 2 S's in the middle, so andyssunshine.com. And there's a calendar on there. There's a sign-up sheet to become a Sunshine Reader. There's a place to get information on Camp You Matter. There's a request form for wristbands. If you want wristbands, there's an area where you can request a speaker or presentation. And the calendar will list all the events that we have going on, the ones that are available for you to attend. There are quite a few of them that, when I do the presentations in the schools, the public can't come for security reasons. It's difficult to get onto the school campuses these days. So those are limited, but there are other events, and you can find those all on our website, andyssunshine.com.
Well, LeAnn, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about not just the foundation, but also your new book.
Oh, I'm so excited about it. And that is such a weird thing to say, isn't it? I'm excited about a book that talks about how I lost my kid to suicide. But I am excited about it. I'm ready to have this amazing life, live, and I want to share that with everybody and anybody who wants to know how to do that.
Well, I think it's going to help so many people. And there's reason to be excited about that. My goodness, it's such a journey and such a personal journey, but I believe you're going to help so many people on their path, and just really applaud you and thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and talking about my book and my foundation, all the things that I'm really passionate about right now.
Well, thank you, LeAnn. This is such a difficult and heart-wrenching topic for so many people. If you find yourself struggling and you don't know where to turn, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 800-273-8255. Again, that number is 800-273-8255. It's 100% confidential, and it's open 24 hours a day. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with LeAnn. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with LeAnn is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, LeAnn will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with LeAnn airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithlarianne.com for more information.